June 3, 1944. Normandy coast, France. A German artillery observer crouches in his concrete bunker overlooking Sword Beach, peering through the pre-dawn darkness. His 88mm gun sits 400 meters behind him, carefully sighted to enfilade the beach approaches. He has rehearsed this moment for months. The ranging is perfect, the ammunition is stacked and ready. At first light, when the invasion fleet appears on the horizon, his gun will begin its deadly work. Then he hears it, a sound unlike anything in his experience. Not the shriek of an incoming shell, but something worse, a rushing, tearing noise that seems to come from everywhere at once. The air itself appears to fracture. In the span of 3 seconds, 24 high-explosive shells bracket his position in a pattern so precise it might have been drawn with a compass. The observer survives. His gun does not. Neither does his crew, his communications equipment, or his ammunition store. 7 kilometers out to sea, a British cruiser has just demonstrated the most devastating innovation in naval fire support since the invention of the explosive shell itself. The weapon was called the barrage mounting, though sailors knew it by a simpler name, the Mattress. It could fire 24 5-inch rockets in a single salvo, delivering nearly half a ton of high explosive onto a target area in less time than it took a conventional gun to fire twice. More importantly, it could do this before enemy artillery could range and return fire. It was not elegant. It was not sophisticated. It was, however, brutally effective at a task that had bedeviled naval operations since the age of sail: how to suppress shore batteries quickly enough to protect landing forces. On D-Day alone, ships equipped with Mattress mountings fired over 15,000 rockets at German coastal defenses. The weapon has since faded from popular memory, overshadowed by more glamorous technologies of the Second World War, yet it represented a fundamental shift in how naval forces projected power ashore, one that would influence weapons development for decades to come. The problem was as old as amphibious warfare itself. A warship closing on a hostile shore faced a tactical nightmare. Shore-based artillery enjoyed every advantage. It was stationary, allowing for precise pre-registration of firing positions. It could be heavily protected by concrete emplacements. It could stockpile ammunition without weight constraints. Most critically, it could observe the fall of shot against the static backdrop of the sea, making range corrections trivial. A ship, by contrast, pitched and rolled with the swell. Its guns had to compensate constantly for the vessel's motion. Even the finest naval gunnery relied on a process of ranging shots, walking the fire onto target through successive corrections. This took time. Time meant vulnerability. The Royal Navy had learned this lesson bloodily at Gallipoli in 1915, where Turkish shore batteries had savaged the fleet despite overwhelming naval firepower. HMS Irresistible, a pre-dreadnought battleship displacing over 15,000 tons, was sunk by shore batteries that she could not suppress. HMS Ocean met the same fate hours later. A single, well-sighted coastal gun could force an entire battleship to withdraw. The mathematics were cruel and unforgiving. A shore battery might fire 30 rounds before a ship's guns found the range. Those 30 rounds could cripple or sink a vessel worth more than an entire army division. The Dardanelles campaign had demonstrated that naval power, for all its mobility and firepower, could be negated by a few determined gunners behind concrete and earth. By 1940, as Britain contemplated the necessity of eventually returning to Fortress Europe, this problem had become existential. Churchill himself recognized that any invasion would require close naval fire support to suppress German defenses during the critical first hours when troops were most vulnerable. But German coastal artillery had grown more sophisticated, more numerous, and more deadly than anything the Turks had fielded at Gallipoli. The Atlantic Wall, Hitler's vaunted fortress line, bristled with artillery. The 88mm flak guns that doubled as anti-ship weapons could achieve firing rates of 15 rounds per minute with trained crews. They were protected by reinforced concrete bunkers designed to withstand direct hits from naval shells. They had excellent optics, rangefinders calibrated to a meter, and communications networks that allowed for coordinated fire from multiple batteries. Against such defenses, traditional naval gunnery faced appalling odds. The Admiralty's own calculations suggested that ships attempting close fire support during an invasion might suffer catastrophic losses before achieving suppression. The Admiralty examined various solutions. Longer-range bombardment kept ships safer but sacrificed accuracy precisely when precision mattered most. Aerial bombing could neutralize some batteries but required air superiority and was notoriously unreliable against hardened targets. Specialized bombardment ships with heavier armor simply did not exist in sufficient numbers. What was needed was a weapon that could deliver devastating firepower instantly, before enemy gunners could respond, and could be mounted on vessels that were not themselves heavily armored. The solution, when it emerged, came not from the naval establishment, but from the urgent improvisations of Britain's clandestine warfare apparatus. The weapon originated at the Firs, a heavily guarded facility in Buckinghamshire, where the Ministry of Supply's Directorate of Miscellaneous Weapons Development worked on projects too experimental or too dangerous for conventional research establishments. Here, in workshops hidden behind trees and barbed wire, engineers were tasked with creating weapons that could support resistance movements and special operations across occupied Europe. One team, led by Major Millis Jeffress, had been developing rockets for a variety of purposes. Rockets possessed an advantage that conventional guns could not match: instantaneous salvo fire. Where a gun must pause between shots to reload, a bank of rockets could launch simultaneously. The principle was ancient, but the application to naval warfare was radical. The device they created resembled nothing so much as a gigantic mattress of steel tubes, hence the name. Each mounting consisted of 24 launcher rails arranged in rows, angled at roughly 45 degrees. The rockets themselves were 5 inches in diameter and 30 inches long, crude by the standards of guided missiles, but marvels of simplicity and reliability. Each contained a solid fuel propellant that burned for approximately 1 second, accelerating the rocket to over 300 meters per second. The warhead carried 25 pounds of explosive, roughly equivalent to a naval 5-inch shell. But the explosive payload was almost beside the point. What mattered was the saturation effect. The mounting worked through electrical ignition. All 24 rockets fired within a fraction of a second, creating an effect that witnesses described as apocalyptic. The noise was tremendous, a crackling roar that could be heard over the din of conventional naval gunfire. The visual effect was even more striking. 24 smoke trails arcing through the air created what appeared to be a solid wall of fire. The psychological impact on German defenders was profound and intentional. Unlike artillery, which announced itself with individual shell trajectories, the Mattress created the impression of total envelopment, of inescapable destruction falling from every angle simultaneously. The engineering challenge lay in managing the recoil. 24 rockets launching simultaneously generated enormous force, roughly equivalent to firing 4 naval 6-inch guns at once. The mounting had to absorb this without tearing itself apart or capsizing smaller vessels. The solution was elegant in its mechanical simplicity. The rails were mounted on a spring-loaded platform that distributed the shock across the ship's structure through a series of hydraulic dampers. The entire assembly weighed roughly 2 tons, light enough to be fitted to converted merchant ships and landing craft without compromising stability. Crucially, the mounting could be reloaded in under 10 minutes by a trained crew working in synchronization, though in practice this was rarely done under fire. Each ship typically carried between 4 and 8 mountings, allowing for multiple salvos before withdrawal. Some specialized vessels carried as many as 12 mountings, transforming them into floating rocket batteries. Manufacturing took place at facilities across Britain, a deliberate dispersal that protected against bombing and maintained secrecy. The launcher rails were fabricated at engineering works in the Midlands, the hydraulic systems at factories in Glasgow, and the electrical firing mechanisms at precision workshops in London. Final assembly often completed at naval dockyards in Portsmouth and Devonport, where specialists integrated the mountings into ship superstructures. The rockets themselves were produced at Royal Ordnance factories, where women workers filled the cardboard-wrapped propellant tubes with a carefully calibrated mixture that had to burn consistently regardless of temperature or humidity. They crimped the stabilizing fins, each one precisely angled to impart spin during flight. They inserted the detonators and sealed the warheads. Each rocket represented perhaps 10 hours of skilled labor, yet they were treated as disposable, expendable components of a larger system. Production numbers remain partially classified even today, but estimates suggest over 100,000 rockets were manufactured between late 1943 and mid-1945. The mountings themselves numbered in the hundreds, fitted to everything from cruisers to converted landing craft. Secrecy surrounded the weapon until its first use, with crews forbidden to discuss it even with sailors on other ships. German intelligence apparently remained unaware of its existence until D-Day itself, a remarkable achievement in operational security. The Mattress saw its first combat deployment during Operation Neptune, the naval component of the D-Day landings. Cruisers fitted with the mountings took station off the Normandy beaches in the pre-dawn hours of June 6, 1944, positioned to provide direct fire support to infantry coming ashore. The naval fire plan called for systematic suppression of German strong points, with each ship assigned specific sectors and target coordinates derived from aerial reconnaissance and resistance intelligence. As landing craft approached Sword Beach, HMS Arethusa unleashed her Mattress mountings against German positions above the shoreline at precisely 0630 hours. The effect was immediate and devastating. German artillery observers, preparing to direct fire onto the invasion fleet, found themselves engulfed in explosions before they could transmit ranging data. Communications trenches collapsed under the weight of falling earth and shattered concrete. Ammunition stores detonated in sympathetic explosions that magnified the destruction. Crews abandoned positions that moments before had seemed impregnable, their will to resist shattered by the sheer violence of the barrage. Throughout the day, ships equipped with Mattress mountings worked methodically along the coast, suppressing any position that showed signs of organized resistance. Forward observers with the assault infantry radioed targets back to the fleet, and Mattress salvos arrived within minutes. The weapon proved particularly effective against bunker complexes, where the saturation effect could seal entrances with rubble or detonate ammunition stored nearby. One account from a Canadian infantry officer describes a German strong point at Ouistreham that survived preliminary bombardment by conventional naval guns, its thick concrete walls absorbing hits from 6-inch shells without significant damage. A single Mattress salvo changed everything. The rockets collapsed the observation posts that directed the bunker's fire, severed communications lines running underground, and started fires in wooden structures nearby that filled the bunker with smoke. The defenders emerged waving white flags, not because they were hit directly, but because they understood continued resistance under such bombardment was suicide. They surrendered to the first Canadian soldiers they encountered, still dazed from the concussion. If you are finding this interesting, a quick subscribe helps more than you know. Records from German units defending the beaches are sparse, but those that survive speak of the weapon with something approaching awe. One battery commander described the Mattress fire as Vernichtungsfeuer, annihilation fire, noting that his crews refused to man the guns after experiencing it. The psychological effect was perhaps as important as the physical destruction. German gunners, trained to endure conventional artillery bombardment, found the simultaneous arrival of multiple warheads fundamentally different from sequential shelling. There was no time to take cover between impacts, no rhythm to the bombardment that allowed for anticipation, just sudden, overwhelming violence. Beyond Normandy, the Mattress saw deployment in subsequent operations along the French coast and during the Rhine crossings in 1945. Landing craft fitted with the mountings provided close support during river assault operations, saturating German defensive positions on the far bank before infantry made the crossing. The weapon's relatively short range, approximately 3,000 meters, limited its use to situations where ships could approach close to shore, but in those circumstances, it proved invaluable. Some vessels carried nothing but mattress mountings, converted into specialized fire support ships that would dash in, deliver devastating salvos, and withdraw before German artillery could respond. The Germans never developed an equivalent system, despite having pioneered rocket artillery with the Nebelwerfer. German rocket systems were primarily land-based and designed for different tactical applications. The Kriegsmarine experimented with rocket-assisted shells and various launcher configurations, but never fielded a naval saturation weapon comparable to the Mattress. This failure reflected larger strategic priorities. Germany was not planning amphibious invasions by 1944 and lacked the industrial capacity to develop specialized naval weapons. Their resources went instead to U-boats and anti-invasion defenses. The Americans developed their own naval rocket systems, most notably the landing craft tank, Rocket, which carried over 1,000 smaller rockets for beach saturation. These weapons shared the Mattress's basic principle, but optimized for different applications. American rocket craft fired massive salvos meant to suppress entire beach sectors simultaneously, creating a curtain of explosions ahead of the first wave. The British Mattress, by contrast, was designed for more precise saturation of specific positions, with individual mountings targeting distinct enemy strong points. Both approaches proved effective, validating the core concept of overwhelming firepower delivered instantaneously. The Mattress's influence extended well beyond the Second World War, shaping naval weapons development in ways that remain visible today. The principle of naval rocket artillery persisted into the post-war era, evolving into more sophisticated systems as guidance technology improved and solid fuel chemistry advanced. Soviet Navy rocket systems for shore bombardment drew directly on wartime British experience, with Soviet engineers studying captured German intelligence reports on the Mattress and interviewing German prisoners who had experienced its fire. The Red Navy's BM-14 and BM-21 naval variants shared the Mattress's emphasis on saturation fire, though mounted on different platforms and using different propellants. Early American attempts at guided naval rockets, developed in the late 1950s, similarly acknowledged the Mattress's demonstration that suppressive fire required volume delivery faster than enemy gunners could respond or take cover. Even modern naval guns with rapid-fire capabilities owe something to the Mattress's tactical legacy. The concept that suppression requires saturation, not just accuracy, influenced the development of weapons like the American Mark 45 gun system and the Italian OTO Melara 76mm, both designed to deliver high rates of fire against shore targets. The weapon proved that sometimes the answer to a tactical problem is not precision, but overwhelming volume of fire delivered faster than the enemy can respond. This principle, demonstrated so dramatically off the Normandy beaches, became a cornerstone of modern naval fire support doctrine. Interestingly, the concept has come full circle with modern systems like the American Zumwalt-class destroyers, originally designed to fire precision-guided projectiles, but now being retrofitted with long-range rocket systems that bear a conceptual resemblance to the Mattress, albeit with vastly superior accuracy and range. The actual impact on German defensive capabilities is difficult to quantify. D-Day succeeded for many reasons, and naval gunfire support was only one factor among many. Yet after-action reports consistently note that German artillery response on D-Day was far less effective than pre-invasion estimates had feared. Batteries that should have devastated landing craft remained silent or fired sporadically. Some of this resulted from Allied air superiority and preliminary bombardment, but ships equipped with mattress mountings accounted for a significant proportion of suppressive fire in the critical first hours. One analysis suggests that German artillery fire was reduced by approximately 60% in sectors where mattress-equipped ships operated, compared to sectors relying solely on conventional naval gunfire. The psychological effect on German morale was substantial if unquantifiable. Defenders who survived the bombardment spoke of the weapon with particular dread, often conflating it with other rocket systems in confused accounts that suggest the sheer terror of the experience overwhelmed precise observation. This was, in its way, a success. A weapon that panics defenders into abandoning positions achieves its objective whether or not it scores direct hits. The Mattress excelled at creating panic. Few examples of the weapon survive today. A mounting can be seen at the Imperial War Museum in London, mounted on a section of ship deck to show its installation. The rockets themselves, being expendable munitions, are even rarer. Most were fired during the war or scrapped afterward. The ships that carried them returned to merchant service or were broken up in the post-war demobilization. Unlike more glamorous weapons, the Mattress generated no popular mythology, no films or famous photographs that might have secured its place in cultural memory. It was a workhorse weapon, unglamorous and effective, forgotten once the emergency that created it had passed. Yet the Mattress represented something profound about British weapons development during the war, a willingness to embrace radical solutions when conventional approaches proved inadequate. The weapon emerged from the same spirit of desperate innovation that produced the bouncing bomb and the Mulberry Harbors, a recognition that survival sometimes required abandoning orthodoxy. The engineers at the first did not set out to revolutionize naval gunnery. They set out to solve a specific problem: how to keep German gunners from slaughtering British soldiers on the beaches. The solution they found was crude, simple, and devastatingly effective. June 3, 1944. 7 kilometers out to sea. A gunnery officer checks his watch and gives the order. 24 rockets leap from their rails in a stuttering roar. 3 seconds later, a German artillery position ceases to exist. The gun that should have commanded Sword Beach never fires a shot. The crew that trained for months never gets the chance to use that training. The invasion succeeds in part because of decisions made in a secret facility in Buckinghamshire, translated into steel tubes and solid fuel rockets, delivered with devastating precision onto a beach in Normandy. The Mattress did not win the war, but it helped ensure that men who should have died in the surf lived to fight inland. Sometimes that is enough. Sometimes a forgotten weapon matters more than the famous ones. Sometimes the most important innovation is the one nobody remembers. If you liked my video, please share your opinion in the comments box and subscribe to the channel. Also, turn on the bell icon so that the latest videos like this keep reaching you. See you in the next video. Take care and goodbye.